So remember, it's the fear. Underneath the fear, you have the shame. And underneath the shame is really a very strong desire to be loved and connected. And in being loved and connected, it's really important for you to start with yourself. Hello and welcome to the I Love Me Lab show. My name is Gail Buck, and I'm an NLP Master Life Coach, meditation instructor, and a seeker of happiness. And each week, we're going to bring you an inspiring person or message to help you discover additional ways of self-care, self-love, and becoming a healthier, happier you. So thanks for spending time with us today, and let's let the show begin. Hey there, and welcome to the I Love Me Lab. Today we are doing a solo episode with me. My name is Gail Buck, and I'm your host. And I am also a life coach. And with that, I've coached hundreds of people. And so I decided to do this podcast today because there seems to be this underlying request from every client that I have. And it's really kind of that step on how can they move to the next level? How can they get out of the situation that they're in? And whether that means, getting a divorce or getting married or getting that job promotion or starting their own business, getting to the next level financially, whatever the case might be, why do they feel stuck and sometimes or oftentimes unable to move? Why do they get frozen in the state that they're at? So there seems to be like this common thread, and that's what I thought we'd talk about today. So I have found with my clients and research that I've done is that the number one reason, emotion that keeps you stuck is fear, sort of. And we're going to dig into that in a little bit because it's really what's lying underneath the fear that's keeping you stuck, not the actual fear itself. So now with fear, I'm not talking about rational fear. I'm not talking about that, I'm in Michigan right now and there are more and more bears and mountain lions out here actually. So I'm not talking about, your heart pounding and running when you see this animal or you're fearing for your life for whatever reason. I'm not talking about that kind of fear. I'm talking about the irrational fear, right? The one that causes trepidation or just this anxiety out of nowhere that kind of keeps you frozen or this dread and nervousness. That's the one that I'm talking about. And so most of the time, when you have this irrational fear, it comes from a deeper emotion. And oftentimes, that emotion is shame. So let's talk about shame a little bit. And if you've dug into it at all, Brene Brown does this just brilliant TEDx talk on shame. So I encourage you all to watch that when you get a chance. She's just wonderful. It really breaks it down for you. And shame is, so I looked up the actual definition in the dictionary, and it said it's a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. So it's when you feel you have this dread that you're afraid that you're going to appear foolish or wrong, or that you're a failure in the eyes of others. And what shame does is it makes us, the fear of looking foolish in front of others, makes us direct all our attention inward. For example, if you're in sales, you will have more success in sales if you're focused outwardly on that customer who's sitting in front of you. And you're actually listening to that customer and listening to what they want and to what they need so that you're able to service them appropriately, rather than inside, taking all the intention inside of you and thinking, oh my gosh, I got to make that sale because if I don't make that sale, I'm not going to eat this month, right? So shame actually makes us look inward into our fear of being humiliated, being embarrassed, failing, and how are we going to appear to other people? So it has been described as the swampland of the soul, because this is what keeps us stuck. It's the shame that keeps you stuck. And so where does shame come from? Shame comes from, usually it's coming from past experience. So I can share a personal experience. I love to speak on stage. When I was younger, when I grew up, well, actually I wanted to be a movie star, but second to being a movie star is I wanted to be a speaker. And I also found that I had a lot of stomach issues at that time because of the diet I was eating, and I was lactose intolerant. And so I would find that when I would start getting nervous and it was time maybe to go up on stage, my stomach would start feeling nervous and I would have to run to the bathroom. And one time, just after I'd gotten up on stage, I had to go to the bathroom. And that was very embarrassing to me that everybody knew. In fact, I think that happened to Hillary Clinton, didn't it? I think so. But anyway, that everybody knew that I had to get off stage because I had to go to the bathroom. And then for years afterwards, anytime that I was going to stand up in front of people to present, I would get this nervousness. Now, I found the culprit. I found that it was my diet. I could monitor my diet, and that problem physically went away, but emotionally, it was still a trigger for me because we create these triggers all the time. And so I would feel fine. I was excited about what I was going to talk about. I was excited about, the people that I was going to be speaking to. And just as I'm about to go onto stage, I would have to run and make my bathroom stops. So it actually took for me working with a coach to be able to recognize what was my trigger and to be able to eliminate that trigger and actually install some new ones so that when I went on stage, I was excited and, thank goodness I no longer have that situation. But it all stemmed from shame and fear. I was embarrassed. And I was embarrassed about what I was going to look like. And because I was embarrassed about what I was going to look like and what I thought the people were going to think, it prevented me from doing a lot of events and a lot of things at that time in my life, which were just stories that I created in my head, right? Brene Brown talks about recoding ourselves. So she didn't use the analogy of a computer, but just imagine for a minute if you were a computer and you had all these codes and all these programs inside of you, what is one little program about yourself that you would change? And if you're so brave, could you put that in the comment box? Because if there's that one little thing that you could change, for example, we have this internal dialogue all the time. And that internal dialogue says things like, I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm not pretty enough. Girls can't do that. Guys shouldn't do that. I'm not smart enough. Nobody will want me. Who am I to think that I could have that job or ask for the promotion? People go through imposter syndrome. They don't think that they know enough to be able to talk about what they feel or what they know, right? Because somebody else is better or they believe somebody's better. What's that one code, that one little reprogramming that if you did that, it would totally change the trajectory of your life? Drop it into the comment box. Mine, I'm 65 years old. I really, honestly, I don't ever think about my age at all. That's not true. That's actually not true at all. I rarely think about my age at all. But every once in a while, an opportunity will show up, and it does cross my mind, that it's like, oh my gosh, am I too old for this? And I have to catch myself. And so that's actually the crux of it, is learning how to identify those thoughts when they come up and give yourself a lot of love, and then take them out and release them so that they don't stop you from moving forward from what you want to do. So there's a beautiful quote here, and it's actually not a quote. It's a passage from a speech from Theodore Roosevelt. And maybe you've heard it, maybe not. And it's from the speech referred to as The Man in the Arena. And I'm going to read to you because I don't want to mess it up, and it's so powerful and beautiful. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end of the triumph of high achievement, who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Pretty powerful, huh? I love that passage. For me, it's kind of a game changer. So, what is preventing you from getting in the arena? So, let's dig deeper into even. So, let's say the fear, if you dig deeper into the hole of fear, takes you down into the well of shame. And what's at that foundation in the well of shame? It's one of the 6 human needs. Tony Robbins talks a lot, always, about the 6 human needs. And this is a need that must be met by everyone. And this human need is love and connectedness. So, what happens when we're afraid to stand on that stage, for example, or afraid to ask that guy or that gal out, or afraid to ask for that promotion? What happens when we're afraid to do that because we're simmering in the shame of unworthiness, right? Or maybe fearing humiliation, not getting in the arena is so eloquently spoken by Theodore Roosevelt. We're not getting in the arena. We're sitting in the stands, watching, maybe criticizing, judging the people that are in the arena. But guess what? The difference is that the people in the arena aren't worried about those of us who are sitting in the stadium watching and judging, because we're sitting in the stadium. We're just sitting there, right? It's the ones in the arena. That's the difference. It's the ones in the arena that are willing to fail, willing to humiliate themselves, willing to embarrass themselves, willing to face rejection, willing to lose. So I don't know a single successful person out there who hasn't lost several times before getting to that level of success, who hasn't experienced immense amount of failure on the way to a success. And so when we're sitting in the fear of the shame, which ultimately is the fear of not being connected, of not being accepted, we're missing out of a lot of things. We're missing out of pure joy. We're missing out of being who we really are. So let's dig into connectiveness, because Maya Angelou says, you only are free when you realize you belong no place, and you belong every place, and no place at all. And so ultimately, it's about belonging to you, which brings us to the I Love Me Lab, which brings us to self-acceptance and self-love. So in order to have compassion for others, we have to have the deepest compassion for ourselves. Wouldn't you agree? What happens when we don't have compassion for ourselves? What happens when we live in the fear of failure, so we don't do anything? Think about when you were a child. Think if you had a child or have a child. Do you keep them? And maybe some of you do, I don't know. Do you keep them from trying things because they might fail? Or do you want them to try things so that they're able to experience life a little bit better? And ultimately, like like when a child learns to walk, I mean, they fall down a lot, right? And they have to fall down a lot before they can actually stand up and walk. So let's back up a little bit, back into from the belonging to the shame. So what does it matter if we have shame? What if I told you that shame is what keeps us is one of the biggest factors of keeping us in cycles of addiction? So whether we're talking about numbing ourselves with drugs and alcohol, or we're talking about numbing ourselves with, I certainly have been guilty of watching a whole Netflix series in a weekend. And typically, yes, oftentimes because the series is just really that good. But sometimes it's also because I'm frozen and I'm numbing myself about moving forward in some direction. I don't know what to do. And so a solution for me is to numb myself from whatever that problem is and to hunker down in front of Netflix series and watch the whole thing from start to finish. So I also work a lot with parents that have adult children with addiction. I'm a parent with an adult child with addiction. So I work with a lot of moms just like me. And one of the challenging things in working with moms like me is that, and with that illness and all the emotions that are surrounding that illness, is that oftentimes parents, because there's so much shame, even for those of us who don't identify it as shame. People used to ask me if they go, well, do you feel shame? And I know that shame is a stigma attached with addiction. And I would say, no, I don't feel shame. I know that I was a good mom and I was a great mom and I continue to be a great mom and I do the best I can. And it wasn't until I really dug in, I had to call out my own BS. I mean, yes, I do think I was a great mom. And yes, there is, even now, this gurgling shame sometimes. I identify it now. I don't let it stop me from living my life the way I want to live my life. But there is that shame that, could I have done something differently? Did I miss it? Was I a bad mother? Was I not enough that I wasn't able to help my child avoid this path? So it really being truthful with ourselves. And here's the thing, when you get really truthful and authentic and vulnerable with yourself, it can really hurt. I mean, it really can, because you're just kind of facing all your demons when you're being truthful with yourself. And it doesn't mean that I wasn't a great mom in my example, but it does mean that I still harbor some limiting beliefs about myself. And so what you can do is, if you have these feelings of shame, and I'm going to tell you something. If anybody's out there saying, I don't have any shame about anything, you might not be digging deep enough, because most of us just do. And some of it is it's all relative, what's deep and what's heavy and what's important and what's not. It's all relative to our own lives, right? There are lots of things that sit out there, and there's lots of things that we bury, and that's just part of the human condition. And it's okay. It's only when these things stop you from really being the great, wonderful person that you were born to be. So the number one thing that you can do to really get out of the shadows of the shame is first identify that that you do feel shame about something. Identify it. Call it out and admit it. It's just part of being human. And then watch your self-talk, so that you're able to identify, oh my gosh, Brene Brown talks about, she's like the best speaker on the subject of shame. And she says even now, even today, she'll still catch herself triggered by things that will have that shame wash over her. So being able to identify, what are your triggers? What happens? I mean, let's go back to my stage example. For me, seeing that stage and that moment's coming up, and that anxiety and anxiousness and excitement all rolled into one is coming up, which would trigger my feeling of having to use the bathroom, right? My son, who has an addiction, bad drug addiction, I can be a trigger for him. If he knows that I'm worrying about him, that can be a trigger and excuse to use. For me, when I hear the phone ring at 2:00 in the morning, it's a natural trigger. All kinds of, fight or flight things go on inside of me. I have to change the ringer on my phone all the time so that it has a different beat, a different, music, because certain songs now on the phone, I hate that. I love Verizon. I hate that standard one call that brings back, all kinds of triggers. So for me, it's removing that trigger. And for me, recognizing that when I hear the ringer, it's a trigger, right? So what are your triggers? What puts you in a place where the sound of something, somebody's voice or some kind of an action makes you freeze or makes you respond in a way that is not your best self. So the first thing is identifying those triggers. And then really watching yourself talk, talking to yourself like you really love you, right? This is I Love Me Lab. And it's all about that. It's about really catching yourself, your self-talk, your language. How is it making you feel? Are you your best friend? Because the most important step in being connected is being self-connected. And sadly, a lot of us aren't. And it takes awareness to get there first, right? To remember, it's the fear. Underneath the fear, you have the shame. And underneath the shame is really a very strong desire to be loved and connected. And in being loved and connected, it's really important for you to start with yourself. And I'm still learning that. I'm still learning that all the time. My wish for you is that you fully embrace your awareness for the things that trigger you, and that you remember in the search and the desire for love and connection, really the one person that matters most is a person that was there the moment you were born, and the person that will be there the moment that you leave this lifetime. And guess what? That person is you. So that's all I have for you today. The number one thing that keeps you from moving forward is really the desire for love and connection. And so as we strive for love and connection with others, don't forget the most important person to be loved and connected to, which is yourself, right? So from my heart to yours, drop some comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I hope to see you next week. Thanks so much for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it and want more information on our guests and resources, please visit ilovemelab.com. And please, if you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe and share with a friend. Hey, there's more great episodes to come. So until next time.